oysters are said to be beneficial to mankind in various ways. These include nutrition, construction, and used as fodder for poultry. Today, I'm at Kponkpo, a suburb of Adan in the Greater Accra region, to find out more about this miracle of nature called oysters. I'm going in oyster mining. Oysters are mostly fished from the Volta River and are common at Adan in the Greater Accra region. In Ghana, oysters are either cooked, fried or dried. To many in Ghana, this seafood can best be taken with palm nut soup and other Ghanaian dishes. Safely strapped in my orange life jacket, I joined Emmanuel Sabuno and his crew of 2 to go oyster mining on the Volta River. Surrounded on both sides by the calm-looking green waters of the Volta River, I looked forward to this exhilarating experience. Dotted on the river were canoes carrying other oyster miners. As we cruised along, we bypassed a number of small villages including Agokpo, Chachukofe, Agota, and Agbeve. As I sat on the hard wooden board serving as seats in the canoe, I kept wondering why Emmanuel and his crew were not in life jackets. I also noticed that the other miners we encountered on our voyage were also not in life jackets, though there has been reports of people losing their lives due to accidents. I inquired from Emmanuel why.
We life jacket can wipe on your dark or if you can wali pa hitu kolo heone. Lomenuanga yuso wang gauge ke lokulu yo ka trumbine sano ha chonanya. Kolo ile wa we life jacket on wanga pa kelo wanga ni kweke kolo he.
The journey from Kponkpo, the oyster hub in Adan, to the mining point in the middle of the river took about an hour. As a first-timer cruising on the river, I kept praying in my mind for my safety, though I tried to act normal so my host do not see the evidence of fear on my face. Then, an interesting spectacle arrested my attention. To my right was a tired oyster miner taking a nap in his canoe. Wow, I said to myself, this was a typical example of one man's poison being another man's delicacy. Whilst I was scared of the river, here was Mr. Miner ascending to dreamland on the river. Finally, we arrived at our destination. One of the aides dropped anchor. Emmanuel began to gear up to dive to the bottom of the river to mine for oysters. He began to tape his fingers to protect them from being cut by the sharp oyster shells.
Why you saw solid black nugget one in the benepene, no koneko po one in the alo wakuna plami kongo one in the cololia pure.
I was particularly fascinated by the improvised diving goggles made of glass and the inner tube of a car tire.
Nyagbane ha woji e han oyi yomo beko mami. Just to a rubber a piel a big papa Jonah. Loka a pecano cone cam am lalo hingemi pa lewa manaja manome specially no market use.
I'm coming to try it on because Emmanuel told me that when they wear this for a longer time, they get headaches sometimes. This is the end result. My face being marked as if I was a commando ready for jungle warfare. Kemino nisane nyena keho nyehe ka emi wo life jacket mo hu owi life jacket ni no ma o loko ma sepami
jine keji kan ni chumi o amna lo we he wo mi jine sane wa na kan diving youth no mekiko wange special glass no wa use so se ndo ya pe kan no ko locally no ko no wa use Kolo endo me ki kon eji no ko ne e manyi ma onya gba ba ha wo se ne wa ke ne wa be ku won wa nge ndo use lolo lo wa use tade ndo me ki kon ko wa ke
The final call in Emmanuel's well-choreographed preparation was tying a piece of rock wrapped in a shirt around his waist. Kenya ya mapeka nene swim
wa peka no ko ne do wa swim lo ko maka amasin suban lo wa nge weight ti wa yo nyun ebio lo wa use so te keep your weight me pene wa na fit nge nyun mi na nyun ne ko wo mo kaji.
Now, all geared up, Emmanuel is ready to take a plunge to the depths of the river to mine for oysters. Ably supported by his aides, Emmanuel dives into the river and disappears from the surface. His crew, acting as a support team, keenly monitored his movement from the surface. I eagerly awaited his return, not knowing what to expect. After 15 minutes of staying underwater, Emmanuel emerges and seemed to say, "Mission accomplished." His aides pulls out the hull. Now, these are the results of Emmanuel's mining expedition underwater. 15 minutes of staying underwater has just yielded Emmanuel 30 kilos of oysters. Though the oysters are generally mined from the bottom of the river, they are sometimes bred by the miners themselves.
Parmi qu'on le no ko ye no chonkan eko sugma hene mene afanio mengo heko mengene gravomi le heko mengene moso eko mengene keumi lo manaka moso mi no mo ange kan black lo gravomi no manaka ange kan yellow lo bene enge kekele no ne ka bene we posi no nge ye no ke mo nge lane eko beno mi ko nge cheap price e jwawe ko we ka fun single jon no ko kan 2 years later e ma click kan kikun okay jona po o manye ma jwa le jwa ma wa pe bene nge kikun.
These bamboo poles in the river signify the breeding spots of the oysters.
Bene nga na ka o pa mi ono ne na nga le e nya fin kikun se na ka ono ka 3 years lo 2 years mi bene nga no ne still up e welolo e wetin ko mo cho ma ngbe kan 4 years kla ne ma wa agbo logo jo ma ba o.
Now we are ready for a return trip. The return journey seemed calmer as I had by now gotten accustomed to sailing on the river. Considering all the efforts Emmanuel and his crew have gone through to mine these oysters, the curiosity in me wanted to investigate the economic potentials of oysters. I couldn't wait to get to the riverbank to talk to some oyster merchants. That was an expedition, right? Well, that's how oysters are mined. Now, we shall look at the processing of oysters and its other uses. At the riverbank, the oysters are stored in large baskets. This is where brisk business begins. The lady merchants purchase the oysters directly from the miners. From here, they head back to their micro-processing factories where the oysters are first boiled, then painstakingly taken out of their shells. At this stage, the oysters are either dried or stuffed on sticks and fried for consumption. One delicious oyster kebab sells for 20 pesos when bought from the source. However, goes for 1 cedi when brought to the city. Though all the oyster merchants I spoke to unanimously agreed to the nutritional values of oysters, none of them could mention any specific nutrients human derives from oyster consumption. I therefore visited Dr. Wise Lecha at the Trust Hospital in Accra, who educated me on the nutritional values of oysters.
Oysters are very nutritious. You can find all sorts of nutrients in there: zinc, iron, vitamins. You can find proteins, and then they just come to complement the diet of anybody who consumes them. So they are good protein foods. Let me just put it that way. Just as we use fish and meat and eggs, oysters can also be a very, very important part of the diet.
Another amazing fact about the consumption of oysters is that it is an aphrodisiac. It is also good for the ovaries and increases sexual libido in women. 18th century legendary playboy Casanova was known to take 50 oysters for breakfast every day. Abigail Okanse has been an oyster merchant for over 5 years now. In my interaction with her, she explained some of the challenges of the oyster business to me.
Ake petro ke no me na ke ya yo petro ane le ehejua ho wa ko le ha o se fe so le ji ne ehin ke wa na kiko ejua nge sugba ha wo le ke wa hiyo ehin ha wo ko wa ke ya won wa na no ko bo se pio le mi wa we ni cha kan ehejua wa nge pa no aka ke petro ehejua wa chon ko le ji wa nyagba pio ne wo hu anga ke wa o ke ya wa lo lo ni che ke wa se mi hu ehejua wa ko wa o ke ya wa no ko kan first.
One interesting thing about oysters is that no part of it is a waste. Aside its meat, which has high nutritional values, its shells are also of immense economic importance. Abigail also spoke about some of its uses aside its nutritional values.
La
Some of the other merchants explained further the economic benefits of the oyster shells to them. At Kponkpo, I also saw a truck loaded with oyster shells. In an interview with the owner, who declined to speak on camera, he said the shells were purchased for 3,000 Ghana cedis and will use it to build his house. Research conducted by the University of Washington establishes that oyster shells can be used in landscaping, replacing gravels and tiles. When paired with cement, can be used to design beautiful pavements and interiors. Oyster shells are made up of 95% calcium carbonate. Therefore, when the shells are crushed into powder and mixed with the soil, they release calcium, which deacidifies soil and helps balance the soil acidity. In a country like Ghana, where agriculture is the main income earner, this is a blessing. Making fertilizers from oyster shells is simple and inexpensive, and these fertilizers are organic. Emmanuel believes that when government pays attention to oyster mining, the industry could boom. With the recent economic challenges plaguing the economy of Ghana, a serious look at the oyster business could present an opportunity for economic prosperity.